what is this year, 2024? Anyone?
It's a leap year.
I was going to say leap year.
Yes, it is a leap year also.
It is I don't know. What is it, Carol?
It's a political year.
Oh, no.
Election year.
It is an election year. So I thought we would dive in because I think there's been a lot of discussion about the last election and how to move forward and do so with a biblical perspective and taking into account our belief, right? Does that make sense? A lot of people who were Christians voted one way last time, and maybe their views and opinions didn't line up with the person that they voted for. So there was a lot of discussion after that about different things. So I thought we would dive in by saying, how do you disagree with somebody but continue a relationship? And should you? Let's start at that place. I think, like what I think, and $4 can get you a coffee at Starbucks. But what I think is, I think we always need to be in conversation with people who think differently than we do.
Sure. Yep.
There's a tendency to only surround yourself with people who agree with you because that's easier. Mm-hmm. But I think the older I get, the more I realize that sometimes people that disagree with you can teach you a lot. And that would start from the presumption that you don't know everything. And the older I get, the less I know. Mm-hmm. Like, I just feel in my heart that I want more conversations with people who don't agree with me because I think everybody can teach you something. Mm-hmm. Not because I don't know what I believe, but because I think there may be things I haven't thought of yet.
Sure, right.
So I think it's very important to have conversations and to have relationships with people who don't believe the same way that you do.
Mm-hmm. Well, and those conversations, too, can help us learn a way to have a conversation with a difficult person.
Right.
That the more we practice having those kinds of conversations, the better we get at it.
Yeah. But I will say this, we've forgotten how to have conversations. I can remember a time where, if you were a part of one party or if you were a part of another party, you could still have conversations about things. We've reached an age in social media where it's even hard to have a conversation about things you disagree about.
Well, even within the same political parties, we recently had a presidential debate,
right?
And all the mudslinging, and these are two people of the same party,
on the same side of the aisle.
Yes, slinging mud at each other. They're saying ugly things about each other, and they agree on the vast majority of policy issues. Yeah. Yet they're attacking each other and attacking each other's character.
Personal digs.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the role models that we have in order to have healthy, quote, healthy discussions about political debates about politics. If that's the example we have, we're in a heap of trouble.
Right. And I don't know who said this, but I think it's so wise. They said, we don't have to agree on anything, but we can still be kind. Like, we don't have to agree, but we can be kind. And I think that is our call as believers, because there was a time where we didn't know the truth. And I'm talking about the truth of our faith. Sure. We all were lost at one time. And so we had to have somebody who came along who disagreed with us in the way that we were living in order to hear about the hope of Christ. So when you put it in that frame of reference, I think it's a healthy thing to have people that disagree with you and to be able to have peaceful, kind conversations with people who don't believe the same way that you do.
I think one of the keys to that, at least for myself, is having an attitude of humility, which
so
is
good.
What you're saying. Kindness is always the wonderful fruit of that. But I think I have to start with having a humble spirit, which means I'm willing to listen to someone else's point of view. I'm not going to dig my heels in. I have to admit that I don't know everything, and so I can listen to that person from that standpoint, and then I can be authentically kind.
Yeah. And I think another thing too, when you're in a relationship with somebody who doesn't believe the same way you do, is to be curious. Like, ask questions without being demeaning.
Yeah.
Because there is a way to ask a question where you feel like you're looking down on somebody. But just ask a question to be curious about, diving deeper into what they believe and the stance that they're taking on certain issues. Be curious, be kind. Anything else that you guys would add to that?
Yeah, curious was definitely the one I was going to say as well. But I also think it's really important for us as believers to remember that we have been given the fruits of the Spirit. Mm-hmm. And that's the way we need to interact with the world around us, with love and with joy and with peace and with patience and with kindness and with goodness and with gentleness and faithfulness and self-control. And when we remember that that's the filter through which we should have all of our interactions with believers and non-believers, that we're able to represent Christ in a much better way in all the conversations that we have.
So it's been several years ago now, but my daughter was really small at the time, and there was a group of kids that she saw quite regularly, and it was fun. We all laughed about it because one of the kids came to an event that we were all at, and the kids started saying things about the political season that we were in, and we all laughed about it and had a good chuckle. This has been, like I say, years ago, but we had a good chuckle about it. All the parents just kind of, but we all walked away going, that's what that kid's heard at home.
Right.
And they're just, and it came to mind the other day because I was watching an interaction happen online, and I was like, sometimes I think people are just regurgitating what they've heard.
Yeah.
So much that they think that is their truth. They don't really take time to investigate and don't really take time to dig deep on the issues, and they're just regurgitating what they've heard on this newscast or that newscast. I mean, whatever the case may be, but it took me back to that time where it was obvious that this child was just repeating what they had heard at home, and we all had a good laugh about it, and it was over with. But I think that's what happens a lot of times when you hear people are so outspoken about a particular issue or a particular person, is that's uncovering something maybe deeper in that person's life than we're willing to look or go deep with them about.
That's true. That's true. And there is a newscast for whatever you want to believe.
For sure.
It is no longer just here's what's happening. There's always a slant to it, and we have to know that.
You remember when we only had 3 channels?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I told my
ABC,
daughter that.
NBC, and Fox.
No,
CBS.
ABC,
CBS.
NBC, and CBS.
CBS, right.
Yes, and like you had to get up and change the channels.
And it was a dial.
Yes, and I told my daughter that, and she was like, "What did you? What if you didn't like what was on those 3 channels?" I was like, "We didn't even have like video cassettes. We had to watch what was on TV. We didn't have any other choice." And she thought I was a dinosaur.
And it used to turn off at a certain time of night and just went to white noise.
It play like the Star Spangled Banner and then went off, didn't it?
Yes,
yeah.
It did.
But
Those
there was
the
a
days.
lot less
Showing our age, girls.
opinion out there. I show my age everywhere I go. But there was a lot less opinion out there, publicized opinion, and fewer personalities who are spouting their opinion. And we get personalities, big personalities, and if you don't know where you stand, you go along with what they say because they've got this big cult of personality, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I think we do have to do our own digging,
Homework,
and our own prayerfully looking into issues instead of just, like you said, going along with what either a parent said or one of these big personalities says.
Yeah, it has to be one of those things. It is so volatile right now online. What do you think is the key to bringing peace to the conversation?
I have to laugh because I don't do a lot of political stuff. I don't follow it all that much. But if you look, there is no other realm of life where people are so rude to each other.
Oh, yeah.
You would never be so rude about someone else's grocery store choices.
Yeah.
What in the world do you think you're doing with those frosted mini wheats? You took the last basket of eggs or whatever. I mean, people get crazy. And you wouldn't do that to someone's financial situation. You wouldn't do that to someone's work. Like, what do you mean you're a DJ?
Right. I hadn't thought about that.
It's
That's
the
true.
only realm where people feel like it is their right to be so aggressive.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So knowing that has to start with me. I have to not do that.
Oh, yeah. I learned my lesson during 2020. That when it was nothing but ugly on Facebook, especially. That's the social media I use the most often. Yeah. And between all the pandemic opinions and all of the political opinions, it was overwhelming. And every once in a while I would find myself sharing something, resharing something. And it became a firestorm of just opinion after opinion after opinion and arguments and people saying ugly things. And I was like, I don't think I want to be a part of this anymore. And I had to check out of the politics. And now it's a lot harder to engage in politics because I did do so much checking out.
Do you think that one of the reasons it's so volatile is because now everybody has a microphone? I just started thinking about that. You know, I mean, before you didn't know really how I voted one way or the other, or what I had for dinner last night. You didn't know any of those things. You found those out if we, lived in the same community and we ran into each other at the grocery store, or if we went to church together. Those would be things that we talked about. But now everyone has a microphone and a platform. And I mean, I believe that everyone should have a voice, and that is why we vote.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
But I don't necessarily think that everybody just like leaders in every realm, not everybody who stands on a platform really needs to be there.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also think that we have lost respect for each other. And, I'm just thinking about like political debates that back in the day, you actually used to have debates where people would actually talk about the topics. And there was a little bit of that, ugliness. There's always been ugliness in human hearts, but there was a little bit of that ugliness in politics, but it is on steroids.
That's true.
And because it's on steroids, that's how the rest of us have started playing out. Our political involvement is just like our politicians. Yeah. And when they're ugly to each other and name calling and mudslinging, we go, oh, okay, well, that's the way we're supposed to act. And it's just not true.
And our kids think that too.
I'm probably going to start a really big debate right here. But I mean, to hear you say that, a couple of years ago, I was praying through some of my decisions, and I felt that same thing about the lack of respect. Mm-hmm. And I felt like God whispered in my heart, it's because we no longer value life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when we stopped valuing life, that's when we stopped valuing one another. Mm. I can remember a day when I was in elementary school that we celebrated our differences because that's what made us the United States of America, because we were all different, but we could come together, Mm-hmm. And I felt in my heart several years back that was one of the reasons that I felt like we had lost respect for one another because we no longer value life. Mm. And you see it how many times have you turned on the television and watched the evening news where you hadn't seen a shooting or some kind of terrible thing happening that didn't need to happen, some senseless act of violence, because we don't value life anymore, And so that has been very close to my heart over the last several years, just in thinking about how'd we get here?
Well, I can tell you how I think some of that slippery slope happened, and it's TV shows, movies, and video games.
Oh, yeah.
We normalize all sorts of things that shouldn't be.
Yeah. Do you remember when you first had a kid and you were like super sensitive to everything and you turned everything off? Like you didn't watch the news as much anymore because you wanted them to learn their primary colors. Right. And that anytime you watched a show, you're like, did they always say those words? Because now I don't want them said in front of my kid, that kind of thing.
Yeah, the filter.
It is desensitizing. I noticed it more when I had my girl and started trying to protect her from those things. Your senses are heightened to it, but I think you're right. Yeah, we've desensitized ourselves through media, and we no longer find anything shocking.
That's true.
I think we've also gotten to a place where we no longer respect each other's experiences.
And tell me what you mean by that.
So I think I think it goes back to this whole My Truth movement as well. Yeah. That when we start throwing around the word truth as if it is actually truth, then we start to put up defenses as opposed to really calling it what it is and calling it opinions or calling it experiences or calling it your worldview or your something like that, which does lead to us having differences. Now it becomes, it's my truth. And so we instinctively deep down in us know that two things can't be true at the same time that are polar opposites to each other. And so there becomes that natural fight in us to say, no, this is truth. This is truth, not your nonsense. That's not truth. And so we start to devalue other people's experiences and frame of reference because we've elevated how important that is. So we're not able to really look at each other and say, hey, you have a different worldview, a different experience, a different set of beliefs. And that can be beautiful, but it's not necessarily truth. Does that make sense? That we elevated this whole concept of, worldly truth to a platform that it doesn't deserve. And it makes us much more hostile to each other because we're no longer valuing other people's experiences as
that makes sense.
Bringing in that diversity and that richness into the world.
Right. So, how do you make your political decisions?
Well, whatever the person next to me screams at me, really. If the person who screams
on your way out,
the Facebook
when they hand you
post
that card,
somebody's Facebook post.
When you're on your way to vote and they hand you the card, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you
it's
win.
circled.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
I'll go do that.
Yeah,
then.
I think a lot of it takes prayer. I mean, really,
of
truly,
course.
honestly, because
sure.
we live in a post-truth world where we don't really understand. We don't know who's saying truth and who's not saying truth, and so we look around and go, "Okay, can I trust you or can I not trust you?"
Yeah.
So praying for wisdom and discernment to say, "Okay, who really is speaking the truth and who can I trust in all of this?" I think is very, very important. Asking for that wisdom and discernment.
Yeah.
I have found that I can't find the perfect candidate,
Right.
the perfect platform.
Yep.
So what I have had to do in the past and what I'm planning to do again this year is really parse down the most important issues to me. What are the things that matter the most? Because there are things in each area that I agree with and that I like, but what are the most important things? And it's tied always to what the Bible says.
Yeah. And I'm ashamed to admit this, but there was many years that I would go to vote and not have a clue about half of the things that were on the ballot when I was younger. Now it is easier than ever because of the internet to get a sample ballot for your precinct wherever you vote, and to do a little work ahead of time and do a little research on your own, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I've even when I felt like I was too overwhelmed, and I would take that sample ballot and make notes on it and take it with me to vote because I wanted to remember the choices that I would like to make.
Yeah.
And I also stopped looking at parties because sometimes I think that can be a deceptive thing that you can vote a straight party ticket and you end up voting for people that you don't necessarily agree with, right?
Sure.
Well, that was my point, is that there's no particular party or platform that I'm like, oh, they've got it all together.
Yeah. And here's the thing. Nobody that you elect is going to make the right decision every time. Here's a talking point for you, because we're all human.
Yeah.
And we all have that sinful nature.
Right.
And we're all prone to wonder, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. So even the people that you know the best may not always make the decisions that you think are right. But I believe that if you spend time and ask for wisdom and pray and do your homework, that you will make better decisions than if you do none of those things. Yeah. And you will be better able to carry on conversations when people want to talk about those kinds of things, because you've done a little legwork and you've researched it a little bit and you've said, okay, here are the things that they believe. Just like you said, weighing one candidate against another, saying, here are the things that are really are non-negotiables for me, and I seem to line up with this candidate.
And usually that's biblically based.
Yes, yes. Oh, it has. I think it has to be for believers because there again, we have a sin nature and we want what we want.
Yeah. I think it's also really important to go to the candidate's own website to do your research.
Yeah.
As opposed to go into your most explosive news outlet of choice and getting their opinion and filter on it. When you do that research, find
Yeah.
It's still going to be their biased opinion because they think they are the best candidate. But at least you're much more likely to get the truth and not somebody's spin.
Yes.
On it.
Anything else y'all would add to the discussion?
I will say this. When I have voted in the past, and I do try to vote every time, there are like offices that I haven't researched.
Like soil and water.
Yes. Yes.
Perfect example.
That's right.
No offense to you if you run for a soil and water position.
Right. I'm sure those are vital, but I haven't done the research. Yeah. And to think that I will is probably not likely. So for about maybe not necessarily soil and water, maybe I will. But about the offices that I haven't really researched, you just let the Holy Spirit guide you, right? Pray. I think that's the best thing to do. Obviously, we're talking about the bigger offices and the bigger people, but even on the school board and all those things, let the Holy Spirit lead.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. So if you've got comments, questions, things that help you make better decisions when it comes to voting or the election process, we would love to hear all about them, only if they're kind.
Right.
Because if they're not kind, we just covered that. Go back and listen to the first of this podcast. We talked about kindness. But we love hearing from you. If you can email us at girltalk@thelightfm.org or get in touch on the Facebook page, the Girlfriends page. We would love to hear from you. And we'll have another good discussion for you. So we're going to save you a seat for next time we gather around these microphones for the next Girl Talk podcast.